Most of the students that you will have in your classes will have been learning how to write since they were in kindergarten, but design is going to be a fairly new concept for them. So trying to teach them everything that there is to know about design in the course of a 15-week course in which you're going to have to be teaching them all kinds of other things is kind of unrealistic. So there are some small things that you should keep in mind as you're trying to teach design. One of them is just the basic concepts of contrast, repetition, alignment, proximity, and white space. And then there's a few other things, a few takeaways that they can have with them, such as don't use the word defaults for typography. Don't use Calibri, don't use Times New Roman, don't use Cambria. Don't double space your writing. Nothing looks more like a 10th grade book report than something that's double spaced. And at the same time, don't put 2 spaces after a period. So when I teach undergraduate classes, if at the end of that course students can manage to do that, then I consider that a win. And then hopefully they'll move on to upper division tech com classes in which they can expand their design thinking a little bit more. We're really lucky working at a university that we have lots of software available to us. And there's lots of design software out there that is really specific. There's software out there such as InDesign that can help you do document design. There's software such as Photoshop that can help with photo alterations. There's Illustrator that can help with line art creation. And while those are really excellent pieces of software, those are also pieces of software that our students probably won't be able to have access to once they're in their careers. The pieces of software that they will have access to are most likely going to be Word and PowerPoint. So I tell my students that if you're going to have to create something that is very text heavy, let's create it in Word. And if students know how to use basic styles in Word, they can make a decent document. And if something needs to be a little bit more design focused, I often suggest PowerPoint. And I know that's a little odd that to use PowerPoint from a design perspective, but it's really easy to insert images, insert photos, and make some big typographic choices in there for some sort of documents. So in an Introduction to Tech Com class, I really suggest limiting yourself to those 2 pieces of software and encouraging students to look elsewhere if they want to, but only requiring those pieces of software. I think that as a teacher, you shouldn't require your students to use a specific piece of software such as InDesign, even if you know InDesign is going to be a great tool for them to be able to create a really professional piece. The reality is that they're not going to have that access to them once they graduate. And while they might learn the specific tools needed to be able to function in InDesign, they're not going to be able to have those when they graduate, and therefore they're actually going to be behind the curve because they might not know how to do the same sort of thing in Word. So even though Word isn't an outstanding tool for document creation, such as making a newsletter, you're going to find that many corporations still make their newsletters in Word, and so it's important for our students to know how to function in those what we might call basic pieces of software. So, and then if they do have the ability to learn InDesign, then they'll be able to apply the grounding foundations to InDesign, and then they can learn InDesign at that time. So one of the first things I think you should pay attention to is that design is part of comprehension, that words on a page are extremely important, and we learn how to write and we learn the rules of grammar, but it takes design aspects such as the color choice, the typography, to make readers want to read something. And it's different than academic writing where you're writing for a professor and the professor has to read it, or it's their job to read it. If you're creating something in a workplace where people can just toss it aside if they don't want to read it, we have to really focus on the design choices as well. So I think it's important to remember that reading is not just words on a page. Reading is also all of the design choices that go into it. There's a really great Linda video. It's called Introduction to Graphic Design, and it's very long, and the later chapters go into the technical aspects of graphic design. But the first chapter has a very nice section on just the introductory concepts. The second chapter talks about typography. The third chapter talks about color. And all of that takes only about an hour and a half. So if you can get through all of that, you'll have a really good grounding. If you like text-based things better, there's a book called White Space is Not Your Enemy. It's a really easy book to get into, and it gives a really nice grounding of what design is. So if you feel like you're in over your head, going to Linda is a really great resource, or using this book is another great way just to get your toe in the water so you don't get scared, and to give you a language that puts you ahead of your students for the what we're going to be doing for design.